In the wee hours of the morn, Jake, before the week begins, let us turn our attention once again to that glamour position of running back. Because there's nothing like talking about who the best back is in the history of what place, wherever it is you are. We've been leading up to this for a couple of weeks. We may not be over. I'm envisioning a week 4 and a week 5 on this whole thing. Maybe if people can hang with us, and they may enjoy it. So you saw my list here. We're trying to figure out who the best back in the history of the Valley was, and here are the characteristics that we're looking for. Number 1, and this is not in any particular order. We could always rank them. Speed, flat out speed, quickness, balance and agility, power, instincts, and play in the clutch. Is that a pretty good list? Can you think of anything else right off the bat that,
No,
not pass catching or blocking?
No.
I don't care if you can block, who cares?
Yeah, we're not asking
Kidding.
for a receiver. We're talking about running backs.
Pure running back.
Look, it's great to have a halfback that can go out and into the flats and catch something.
Lydell Mitchell, remember he led the NFC in receiving with 73 one year.
Yeah,
like
David
5
Palmer.
yards. Hey, David Palmer. How about Robert Palmer? He never caught a ball, but he did pretty well in his own way.
Look, when you're talking speed, who do you put up there? Look, I think Meshack, because when I started covering, I got to see Meshack. Fast guy.
A track guy too.
A track guy.
Obviously. Here's the deal. I'm asking some of my colleagues from the past, Mike Gonzalez, Eladio Jaimes, Armando Garza, all these guys, Paul Knatzer, all the way from London, London, England. We're starting to circulate a little questionnaire. I gave them these 6 categories, and I gave them 5 running backs. I gave them 5 names. I gave him Mo Hunter from Harlingen. I gave him the Kid. He's in pretty good company. I gave him Meshack's name, Tony Ellis from Brownsville, Hannah, and Bradley Stevens. That's not to say that I think those are the 5 best backs ever, but in the last 15 or 20 years, if you wanted to make a list, those guys would be right at the top. Before we get into talking about particulars about these guys, I want to throw in some names from our Wayback Machine. There was a guy, now Port Isabel's had a bunch of amazing running backs through the years, starting with a little tiny guy named Casi Barrera, early 1970s. The dude was about 5'5", 140. He had 1,500 yards. He was a little pinball. He was one of the first great Port Isabel backs. Wow. He was followed by a guy named Hendel Woods, who had great speed, a very stylish runner. He had 4,000 yards for the Tarpons in the mid-70s. The late 70s Tarpon of note is a friend of mine, played at UTA when Arlington had a football team, and he used to be pretty good. His name was Travis Sanders. You heard of Travis Sanders' name? Let me tell you what he did in the late 70s. He had 2,478 yards in one season. Set the Valley record way back when. He was the first big-time high yardage back. Remember we talked last week about how the game changed, became more wide open? This guy was for real, man. He went to college to play. Travis Sanders was an amazing back. Another guy from the 70s that you guys in LaFerrier will remember, his name was Tommy Cox. Tommy Cox was one of those storybook athletes. He was a great track man. He went to state. He could play any sport. He was tough as nails. He had an incredible physique. A good-looking kid, man. He went to play for UT, and he even got some looks in the pros for tryout camps. Tommy Cox was an amazing player for the LaFerrier Lions. There's the history lesson for today. Wow. There's a picture that I have in my book of Tommy Cox where he's kind of being held above the crowd, and all the kids are down. He's like, it's just like the ultimate. It's like all the right moves with Tom Cruise, although I think he was a defensive player, but that's all right. Now the people in Donna will get mad at me for not mentioning Oscar Guzman. 1978, that guy was a bull, man. An absolute bull. They said he used to run like John Riggin.
Really?
But I don't think he had the same hair. But he was still a great back. We told you about Mark Morgan last week, right? Remember McAllen High? Glad to mention that guy. Here are some names that you will recall because right about the time you got down here, you remember Ryan Richardson?
Yes,
you met him,
I actually
right?
know him, yeah.
Ryan Richardson was an amazing running back. He had 1,900 yards. He scored 30-something touchdowns. He not single-handedly carried Economedes to the playoffs in their only playoff trip before the last 2 seasons, but he was instrumental. He was a great running back. He ended up at Texas A&I. Of course, they call it Kingsville now, and they did then. But he was a bona fide college athlete. I think he played 2 years up there. We can't talk about great running backs of the recent past without Orly Solis, man. I don't care what anybody says. Well, he played at Roma. That guy had an amazing amount of yards.
Yeah, because he was rushing against all the good teams in his district too. It wasn't like he didn't have nights off.
He wasn't picking on no Carrizo Springs, man. Yeah. Sorry, I hope no one's watching out there. Yeah. Now here's a guy from La Jolla. Remember last week I told you I wanted to pick a city and talk about a guy? You remember Juan Martinez from La Jolla? He was a big strapping kid, about 6'2", about 210, man. He was a horse. He had
Back when they had the university?
Yeah. 1,800 yards. And then as a junior, And then I think he broke his foot or he got hurt early on in senior season and never was the same. But for one season, Juan Martinez was right up there with Bradley Stevens and everybody.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I remember coming into it, everybody was comparing Bradley and Juan Martinez. I mean, that was the other back that year.
He's like, where are they now? I want to hear from Juan Martinez, man, because we remember how good he used to be.
Yeah.
How about Randy Razor from San Benito? I know he wasn't a running back, but he had 2,000 yards as a quarterback. He might as well have been a running back. The early advent of the spread option in 2004. 2004, by the way, with Richardson, Fred Laredo from Edcouch, that was the best year for runners in a long time, since 94, 95.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, when we talk, here's one question I have for you. Mishak, his speed, quickness, he had those two.
Speed, quickness, balance, agility. He's right near the top.
Yeah. Power.
Well, he was a tiny guy, but he wasn't weak. I mean, he wasn't going to let you take him down. He just wasn't a power runner, so he would rank at the end of the list on that. How about instincts, though?
Oh, instincts, great. That and clutch, because when he played Madison in the third round.
07, yeah, 57-41.
Third round, yeah.
Remember he caught that long pass at the beginning, and he styled on that dude from Madison, and they were like, hey, wait a minute, this is going to be tough, man. And it was. No, Mishak was the man. And if you put charisma, flair, show off on here, he'd be number one.
Oh, he'd be number one.